The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Coverage surrounding the death of Nelson Mandela last December, along with the release of the feature film Long Walk to Freedom, provided many Americans with a quick refresher course on 20th century history of South Africa and the destruction of apartheid. But the story and ongoing significance of what happened in South Africa is not fully contained in the story of one man, but only through understanding the complex intersection of the lives of millions of people. Good morning. Among the revealing storylines is that of Amy Biehl, an American and young anti-apartheid activist near Cape Town in the early 1990s. Here's a bit of background about the people whose lives collided in 1993 and became forever entwined.
In 1993, on the eve of democracy in South Africa, Amy Biehl, a Fulbright scholar from Stanford University studying the role of women in South Africa, was stoned and stabbed to death by a mob of young men in the township of Gugulethu in Cape Town. After the 4 young men were convicted and sentenced to 18 years in prison, they applied for amnesty through Archbishop Tutu's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Determined to honor their daughter's commitment to South Africa and its people, Amy's parents, Peter and Linda Biehl, participated in the Commission's hearings. In an act of forgiveness, they chose to support amnesty for the youths, and the men were set free after spending 5 years in prison. After their release, 2 of the young men, humbled by the act of forgiveness, chose to dedicate themselves to the development of underprivileged youths and reached out to the Biehls. Today, they continue to work with the Amy Biehl Foundation, helping to ensure a brighter future for thousands of children.
This year, one of the project teams of Leadership Cincinnati, Class 37, has organized what will become an ongoing Freedom Film Festival here in Cincinnati. The first festival will not be held until 2015, and as what will become the first of several events exploring themes around freedom leading up to that festival, the class helped bring 3 people to Cincinnati for a public event at the Freedom Center in late April. I am joined this morning by the 3 people featured in that session whose work speaks to the future of South Africa and holds up a promise of what all societies in conflict might be able to achieve. Linda Biehl is the founder of the Amy Biehl Foundation, named for her daughter who died in 1993. The foundation aspires to build bridges between the world's privileged and less privileged. Ntobeko Peni was born in Gugulethu Township outside Cape Town, South Africa, as the leader of the Pan-African Student Organization. In the chaos of the dying days of apartheid, Mr. Peni was involved with a public action that turned violent and ended in the death of Amy Biehl. He was convicted and sent to prison. After achieving amnesty from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he sought out Linda and Peter Biehl and has worked with the Amy Biehl Foundation ever since. Manfred Jacobs is the Communications and Club Manager and Senior Correction Officer at Drakenstein Correctional Services, formerly Victor Verster Prison. He knew Nelson Mandela personally. All of you, welcome to the United States, welcome to Cincinnati, and to Newsmakers. I want to go back and find out about how these relationships starts, because I think this isn't just about ideas, this is about personal relationships. When your daughter told you that she was going to use her Fulbright to go to South Africa, was this something as a mother that was understandable to you? Is that where you were personally? Or We all know about children and parents. Sometimes children are going in directions that are very different than parents. Where were you when Amy decided to take this adventure?
Oh, Amy has led us on quite a journey from the time she was born. Amy actually had been working at the Democratic Institute of International Affairs in D.C. in many countries in Africa in emerging democracies. Her honors thesis at Stanford, graduating in 1989 with free Mandela on her cap, but her honors thesis that year was on the emerging democracy in Namibia, on the U.S. involvement politically and from the State Department point of view, interviewing George Shultz. You just followed Amy and you got a whole new life, you know? And so when she actually got the Fulbright opportunity, which was an opportunity to spend 10 months observing the pre-election process and women's role in the transformation, we were delighted because some of her other experiences were probably a lot scarier. Even living in Washington, D.C. could be scary. So she basically said, Cape Town is beautiful. I hope you guys come over and see me. We were really excited that her dreams were coming true and she had this great opportunity.
And how far into her time there did she die?
Well, that's part of the irony. She was due to come home. She had just received a 4-year Jacob Javits Fellowship to get her PhD at Rutgers on African Studies and whatnot. So she was getting ready to come home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ntobeko, taking you back to those early 90s, how did you think about, I mean, you would not have known Amy personally before the incident took place, but how did you think about people from outside South Africa, particularly whites, who were coming to your country to help? What was your attitude?
Well, we were taught that they had a vested interest as investors in South Africa, so they were actually funding apartheid. So that is how we view white people coming from abroad.
So even people who said they were there doing other things, the assumption was there was something else behind it.
Always. It only dawned later on for us that actually it was true, that even white South Africans that had to be drafted into the army chose to go abroad to run away from the system. We did not believe those. In fact, in our political school of thought, that was not a subject to be discussed and taught to us.
Okay, just to make sure everybody's involved here right from the beginning, get everybody's voice in here. Manfred, even though the two of you are about the same age, you didn't know each other.
That's correct.
Where were you as a person? How were you involved, not involved with the anti-apartheid movement?
Certainly. At the time, of course, very young student at school, we had a system what we called, and we said, you cannot have normal school in an abnormal society. So we as a student corps tried our level best, you know, to make schools almost ungovernable by, you know, having position in the school bodies and the student council, and we tried from inside also to influence what is happening, you know, outside. So that's what we did.
Okay. Ntobeko, and I'm sort of exploring this question of change and coming to insight, and that's why I was asking you your relationship to Amy. After the Biehls came and testified at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you had already spent 5 years in prison, and then
that was my 4th year.
That was your 4th year, okay. And when was it that you feel that you began to have some other insight about life and relating to people that you might have seen very differently a few years before? Was it while you were in prison? Was it at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Was it at the moment that the Biehls stood for you? What is it that brought you to a new place?
It was during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission time, because while I was in prison, whenever we were visited by our former leaders and commanders, we were reminded of the oath of allegiance. So we had to live by that oath while we were still in prison. That is how we countered the pain of being incarcerated. My personal turning point was when I met the Biehl family during their presentation. Them showing pictures of Amy with some of the head of states of some of African countries like Namibia. So it actually dawned who Amy was personally.
And up till that point, you hadn't taken the time to find out who she was?
No, not at all. It did not at all interest me to know more who Amy was. Whatever was said during the trial, it was all propaganda. Yeah. So when the family took a position to support the processes and to support the amnesty granted on merits, it made me first to realize there's no way as a parent I will take that position. Amy must have been an adoptee. There's no way that Linda and the late Peter Biehl will be biological parents of Amy. But you know, the reality was all in front of me. There were more facts than propaganda saying the family has taken a position.
For you and your husband, at what point did you decide that you were going to go to South Africa for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Because you didn't need to do that. You certainly didn't need to stand up and ask for clemency for the 4 who had been. What brought you to that decision?
Well, we had been invited by South Africa to come about 6 weeks after Amy was killed. And through, you know, between 1993 to when the hearing was July 97, a lot had happened. However, Amy was very aware of the types of negotiations. Her work with the new Constitution, research and whatnot was all, as I said, she told us about everything all the time. In those days, it was all by telephone. So we were quite aware of what was happening in South Africa. And as she described Easy and Ntobeko, she just described them in hundreds of thousands of angry young men, the young lions, the disenfranchised youth, explain what was happening with them and what might happen with them. So it wasn't a personal thing, and we knew that the negotiated processes that were going forward to bring this country to its amazing election, which is now 20 years, right. What was her goal, her joy. So yes, we did have choices, and no, we didn't have choices. We really had to think about what we might do so we could feel good about our own decisions about Amy and what's good for South Africa as best we could as sort of normal American family. So we did counsel a bit with the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who has added a lot of joy and wisdom to our life. And he said when the hearing date was established, we did talk to him, and he said, well, you know, just go and tell them about Amy and speak from your heart. And what wisdom? That's exactly what we did. And then we became real people. Amy became a real person. We were no longer propaganda, and Ntobeko really learned that we were her biological parents.
By the way, you made reference to Easy. Easy was the other person who was imprisoned with you for the death of Amy, who has continued with the Amy Biehl Foundation, number 4. What was it that then caused you to go and actually introduce yourself to the Biehls, though? That's another step that, again, it doesn't have to happen.
Very brave step, by the way.
That's why I'm intrigued by it.
Not an easy one as well, because you were wondering whether if you invade their space, will you allow that wound to heal? Or will your presence make their life more difficult to deal with the situation? But we were very interested because on the very same day we granted amnesty when our family, communities, and former organization were celebrating our release. On national television at 7 evening, there's a Biehl family again on national television saying, we hope the families, the communities will give the necessary support for them to be able to lead a positive life in a new society. You know, you go to sleep thinking about this family. What is wrong with this family? Because it was enough of what they said during the process. You know, it made the life of the community was easy to grant that amnesty. But again, you hear the very same people saying the society has a responsibility to assist us to adjust as well. When we were out, we were leading a youth club. Former comrades that we recruited into the struggle now did not belong to any cause, so we were concerned. The only cause that they belonged to was becoming drug and alcoholic. Because young people did not invest much time to school, they chose to liberation before education. So we felt we had the responsibility to sort of rally the young people towards a positive cause where they acquire the necessary skills in order to become economically active. He has a Biehl family, they're running institutions not far away from where we live. We had to make that stand. We discuss it with these and say, look, we will be able to be successful in our new mission if we approach the family, and how do we go about to do this? It took us time, and our followers were looking at us, giving us information, said, look, don't tell us, we know exactly what the Biehl family is doing within our community. But our biggest challenge is, what will our presence mean to them? What if we want them to know what we're busy doing? But we made one conclusion. We do want them to be aware. The loss of their daughter is not in vain. Them supporting the processes of South Africa towards change, development, and reconciliation is not in vain. Here is what the very same people that killed their daughter, that they supported for their freedom, this is what they are doing in a new South Africa. This relationship has been ongoing currently for 16 years.
Yeah. It's a long time.
It is.
You know, I'm going to basically be out of time here for the first segment. You're going to be with me for the entire show, but Manfred, I want to get you back. I know you are a great admirer of President Mandela.
Absolutely.
And that you told me before we started that you were actually present the day that he walked out of prison.
I was 16 years old, you know, and I just happened to visit my nephew, who was at the time a correctional officer at the very facility, by then Victor Verster prison. And no idea, because I think we went on Friday and the announcement was only made on the Saturday that the great Nelson Mandela will be released the following day. So I just happened to be there, and that was just awesome. Him walking out, you know, raising his right fist after Winnie Mandela did so, it was just, I stood in awe. Yeah.
He said, I found a quote when he received the Congressional Gold Medal in the United States. He said in his formal speech of Amy, she made our aspirations her own and lost her life in the turmoil of the transition as the new South Africa struggled to be born in the dying moments of apartheid. Through her, our peoples have also shared the pain of confronting a terrible past, and we take the path towards the reconciliation and healing of a nation.
Absolutely.
Had you ever heard the name Amy Biehl on that day that you saw President Mandela leave?
Certainly not, certainly not. And again, the same stance which Ntobeko took at the time, you know, we could care less. What we want is liberation. What we want is people to give us a chance to, that we have self-worth, that we can also be reckoned as people in our very own country. And the one thing that I mentioned it yesterday to the family, I said, you know, 20 years ago, as a youngster, or before that, as an 18-year-old, I was not allowed to vote in my own country. This year, 7th of May, my very child, you know, 18-year-old will be able to vote. And that's fantastic. This is what we need, and this is what we fought for.
We're going to come back and talk about South Africa today and what the world might learn from what you've accomplished. So stay right there. Stay tuned. After a short break, all of us will return to explore what this might mean to the people outside South Africa decades after the original incident. Welcome back. I am joined this morning by Linda Biehl, the mother of Amy Biehl and the founder of the Amy Biehl Foundation, Ntobeko Peni, who was convicted of the death of Amy Biehl and has been the leader of the Amy Biehl Foundation for 16 years now. Is that okay? And Manfred Jacobs, a senior correctional officer at Drakenstein Correctional Services, which is the old Victor Verster prison. So where Nelson Mandela made that walk.
That's correct.
That walk to freedom.
Very revered walk.
That very revered walk. Yeah. You know, as a historian, you know, it's not just about the words and documents, it's about images that create a society, and that walk will always be an important image in your community. Let me ask this question of the two of you. What's the state of South Africa today? What would you say for those of us who have never been there? What would you tell us about how you're doing?
Well, in my view, South Africa is doing well. With the great former state president having left us, it means there's more work to be done. Yeah. A lot could have been done in these 20 years.
It could have.
A lot could have been done.
That got left aside. What would you review?
Let me just say, we tend to give marks, and like our president said, you know, if we have to be honest with ourselves, we most probably out of 10 give ourselves a 7. A lot of things that were achieved, but we tend to be a bit impatient. We realize that we want to fix in 20 years what happened, what went wrong in 300 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of positives in our country. It is just awesome to be there, and the mere fact that we are no longer a number. We actually, you know, we have self-worth, and people know who we are as persons, irrespective of the color of your skin. That's awesome.
What has been the commitment? What has been the action of the Amy Biehl Foundation in South Africa? What has the foundation tried to do and tried to support?
Well, you know, as Americans, we did not go over saying, oh, we should do this and that. In fact, I thought each time we came up against a little incident, we would probably say, oh, this is it, and we'll go back to our sort of normality, if we can ever find that. But in any event, as we were taken to visit the townships of South Africa in October of 1993, it was like, okay, everyone would come up, give us big hugs. Sorry what happened to your daughter. And when are you coming to help? It's like, what? There's this thing called Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is about helping each other. And little did we know that we had become a part of the struggle in its own sense. So we didn't expect to start a foundation at that time. However, people sent us money. So we set up a little 501c3 here, and we thought, okay, we'll maybe get that school some new books or help out with the new basketball court. That's pretty much we thought we'd do. And then because of Amy's background and her relationships with people in Washington, D.C., we were offered money, unsolicited grant from USAID, and taking government money was a very big step, but we thought, you know, maybe we can do some good with it. So we had to set up the South African Foundation, and in our research, we realized that these young people, as Ntobeko said, had nothing in their lives. After the struggle was over, we talked to mental health people in the country who said, so where is youth energy going now? And so what's going to happen? So we really looked around at possibilities, and we listened to what the government was talking about, the needs of the country. They needed skills, jobs, development with their youth. Hence the young people coming and learning to make weld and make blocks and all that. They needed, you know, help in literacy, kinds of basic things.
Ntobeko, you're with the foundation. You're one of the leaders of the foundation now. How big is it? What are we talking about? How many people do you employ? How many people do you serve?
At this point, our employment is around 80, and we serve about 12,000 children on a daily basis.
Wow.
Yeah.
With all sorts of things.
We provide various resources. We've taken a big advantage because we know we have privileged schools that are trying to adopt unprivileged community schools. So we facilitate that relationship between the schools. Like we go to schools that have swimming pools and we say, hey, we've got kids from the township who cannot swim. We will be able to transport them, provided you train them to swim for free. So these are opportunities that we're providing to the kids. We're taking kids to Northern Ireland for field cricket. We've brought a number of young people to the States. So many types, so many groups. So these are opportunities that we provide to young people.
And every day, though, just to add to this, there are centers of after-school programs, so kids in their neighborhoods can go and do art and drama and sport and fun things. And I want to say part of those 80 people are facilitators who live in the community who've had no jobs but have talent. And then the office staff is, what, about 20? But our role, when Peter died, we were running bakeries and doing a lot of other things. We were up to 180 at one point.
I want to get one final topic. This is your first time in the United States, so I'm going to ask you this question. What do you think the United States could learn from the experience of South Africa over the last 20 years?
The one thing I must say, we have, and we mentioned earlier, what we call the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One thing that I've learned, given your past, you did not have that platform where people can come and vent their frustration, where people have an institutionalized system where we can just, you know, just grieve and just, irrespective of the outcome, where we can just publicly say, I'm sorry for what I did. And this is what we did, and that really, truly assisted our country with the healing process. And one thing that people in general perhaps still have here a lack of is they don't want to close the door behind them, you know. And once you don't do that, you won't be able to progress. You need to let bygones be bygones, and just take a breather and say, okay, reorientate yourself, focus, and what can I now do in order to assist the process. So this is what we tried. Yes, we are not where we want to be, but we certainly are on our way.
You know, I can't help but think of this in comparison to we have a sister city in Ukraine, and Ukraine is in the news right now, and it's in eastern Ukraine. It's the second largest city in Ukraine. And from my perspective, I was there in '91. They've wasted much of their time, and they've wasted many opportunities, and it's wonderful to see people who have not wasted that time. Absolutely. So congratulations. I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. To learn more about the work of the Amy Biehl Foundation, check out two websites. amybiehl.org is the American-based website. amybiehl.org.co.za is the South African website. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. We leave you this morning with some final scenes of the work of the Amy Biehl Foundation. Have a good week.
The Youth Literacy Program.